Salve omnes. Okay, we're continuing with our Olympians. We've now covered almost all of them. Today is probably the most important one. Although Zeus is the most powerful god and the ruler of the universe and involved in many stories and of course had temples all over Greece, it's more likely that this goddess is the most famous, and she probably appears in more stories than any other character. That is, she's going to be the protectress of many of our heroes and take like a major leading role in just so many stories. Today we are talking about Athena. Her Roman name is Minerva. And we start with her origin. So now that we've covered almost all of the Olympians, we should backtrack. Remember how we had Cronus and Rhea, the king and queen of the Titans, and they had 6 children, the ones that Cronus swallowed plus Zeus, right? So those 3 male ones were Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. We've talked about all of them already. And then of the women, it was Hera, Demeter, and Hestia. So far, we've only talked about Demeter. We'll have a Hera video and a Hestia video coming up soon. The other Olympians are children of other Olympians. So we've talked about Apollo and Artemis, the children of Zeus and Leto. And then Athena here is another child of Zeus. But it's kind of strange. As you can kind of see from this slide, her origin is absolutely unique. You're not really going to have any other culture come up with a myth comparable to the origin of Athena. So first, you should be able to identify both figures here. Oh, we have already talked about Hephaestus and Ares and Hermes as being children of Zeus as well. Forgot to mention them. You should be able to identify this man as Hephaestus because of the axe. And of course, you should be able to identify Zeus because of his seated position, his beard, and of course that really fancy looking lightning bolt. So what's coming out of his head? Well, Zeus, as we've talked about, is a bad husband. He is unfaithful to his wife Hera, the queen of the universe, and frequently ends up being a father of children by other goddesses or mortal women. So Zeus is expecting a child with the goddess. Her name is Metis. But Zeus hears a prophecy. And if you think back to our Apollo videos, we talked about prophecies, the ability to divine the future. Zeus hears that if Metis has his child, she's pregnant already and she's about to give birth, that child will grow up and overthrow Zeus. Now, if you think back to the very beginning of the semester, that was the origin of the universe. It was always about a young male overthrowing his father and taking over the universe. First, we had Uranus. His son Kronos overthrew him. Then we had Kronos. His son Zeus overthrew him. So Zeus is well aware of this tradition of sons growing up, becoming powerful, and removing their father as the leader of the universe so that they can take that role. And Zeus wants it to end right here. And Zeus actually does find a way to cheat fate, to cheat destiny, to make the prophecy not actually happen. Zeus is the only character in Greek mythology that has this ability, and he does it once or twice. So Zeus finds out that Metis' child will overthrow him. So Zeus attacks Metis, and she changes into different shapes to try to avoid him, and she turns into a fly so she can try to fly away. See what I did there? Zeus swallows this fly and digests it. And none of the ancient authors explain exactly what goes on, but Athena emerges. So you can kind of think of like Zeus digests Metis. And remember that Metis was pregnant and she was going to give birth to a boy. And all of this is digested by Zeus, somehow in some unexplained weird way. And then Zeus has a headache. A splitting headache. See what I did there? Splitting, axe, right? Okay. Zeus has a splitting headache, and he calls Hephaestus. He's like, I have this horrible headache. You got to do something about it. So Hephaestus literally takes his axe, splits Zeus's head wide open. Zeus, of course, can take this because he's a god. He heals very quickly. And Athena emerges from his head. in full armor with a shield and a spear and a helmet, wearing a dress. She's fully formed as an adult. A miniature version, and then she expands as soon as she gets out of his head, or something like that. That's what it looks like in the artwork. And this kind of explains a lot about Athena's sort of she's a very contradictory goddess. First, she's the only goddess that you're going to see wearing a dress that will have a spear and a helmet and a shield. And her shield will obviously will be very prominent here. This is a great vase painting. You can see many of the gods here witnessing the birth of Athena. First, everybody always asks me what's going on down here. I have no idea. We don't have any explanation. Perhaps the vase painter just wanted something to fill in the space. But if you look, you can identify Zeus easily here. Here's his lightning bolt. Here's his staff of power. Notice that he's the only one seated and everyone else is standing. You can tell that this is Poseidon because of his trident. You can tell that this is Hephaestus because of his axe. And there's Athena. Again, the birth of Athena, it's very unique, kind of unforgettable. Here's another vase painting. That is the birth of Athena, was featured in many different works of art. Here we see her again with her helmet and her shield and her spear emerging right on out of Zeus's head. Hera is very surprised and shocked by this, of course. Now, this explains a lot about Athena. She has no real mother. Again, how Metis and Metis' son got digested by Zeus is never really explained. Either way, Zeus clearly gave birth to Athena. I mean, here it's happening right now, right? So she is going to be very different from the other goddesses. She's going to be very deferential to Zeus. That is, she is always going to take Zeus's side. So that may or may not put her on the opposite side of Hera, as Hera is frequently kind of attacking or going after Zeus's children, his illegitimate children. Athena will oftentimes take their side as their sister. And Athena is always going to be on Zeus's side. Athena is scary. I mean, remember how we looked at Artemis was kind of scary in that one scene. Athena can be scary as well because she is a goddess of war. But she isn't like Ares. She might be a little scary, but she doesn't represent blood and death and carnage like Ares does. She represents wisdom and victory in war. But of course it's still war, so she is to be feared. And you will see snake imagery and a face generally on her chest plate or around her neck. And we'll see some better pictures of this. It's called the Aegis. And we'll talk about it when we get to a better slide of it. Here's another Athena. Notice that helmet, the spear, and the dress. Again, if you have helmet, spear, shield, dress, you almost certainly are looking at Athena. We've seen this one before a few times. We've talked about Poseidon. We've talked about Hermes. Here's Athena. Her sacred bird is the owl. In many cultures, the owl represents wisdom. She's the goddess of wisdom. She came out of Zeus's head. That's why she represents wisdom. Plus, generally, you need to be wise to be victorious in war. So here we see an owl on her shield. Notice her prominent helmet. You can usually tell Athena because she's the goddess that has a helmet on. So if you can't see the spear or the shield, she might look like other goddesses, but none of them will wear a helmet. We see it better here. Again, this is called the Aegis. Some people pronounce it the Aegis. And it is very simply the decapitated head of Medusa that Perseus dedicated to Athena. Well, technically, Perseus gave it to Zeus, and Zeus gave it to Athena, according to most versions. We'll talk about that when we do our Perseus unit. But it is a symbol of power and fear, and of course, it's implied that it has the ability to turn people into stone, although Athena never uses it to that effect. It's really mostly to scare people. Notice again the helmet, and like we saw with Ares, frequently the helmet is up on her head instead of down over her face. so that the artist can really show the facial features. We have so many statues, sculptures, paintings of Athena. Again, probably more than any other god or goddess, even more than Zeus. And probably because she's the most interesting. Most people consider her to be the most interesting of the Olympians because she represents so many seemingly contradictory things. She's female. She wears a dress. She's a maiden like Artemis. She never marries. She stays away from men. She never has any children. And she's beautiful, long hair, wearing a nice dress, but she'll kill you. She's a warrior. She has an incredibly warlike helmet, which might have some sculptures on it, a nice giant plume. And again, the snake imagery going along with that decapitated head of Medusa. That is, in case you're not sure about who Medusa is, we will cover Medusa in our Perseus unit, but Medusa had snakes for hair, which is why Medusa's head has snakes, and hence snakes all over Athena here. And, you know, you think of like, oh, Perseus's gift to her, and you can see it right here, the Aegis. You got Medusa's decapitated head, really scary over here. Then you got the owl, you know, the symbol of wisdom. Although owls in nature can actually be very, very fierce. Frequently we think of owls as being these friendly, wise creatures. Athena, of course, is associated with the city Athens. We're going to see a lot of Athens. And the statue of Athena, that was in the Parthenon. The Parthenon, the most famous temple of all. The Parthenon is the temple of Athena. It's on the Acropolis in Athens. This is a modern replica of what we think the statue of Athena inside the Parthenon on the Acropolis in Athens probably looked like. Again, based on our literary sources. That is, ancient Romans and Greeks viewed the giant statue, described the giant statue, and with their words, we can, and based on, of course, other statues and other temples that we do still have, are capable of imagining what it probably looked like. That it was made of gold and ivory, it was enormous, it was very shiny. You see snake imagery. There's a whole snake right there. Again, sort of associating her with Medusa. You'll see the Aegis right there and lots of little snakes. An incredibly intricate helmet here with 3 plumes. A very, very long spear. An incredibly elaborate shield. And this little minor goddess, whose Greek name is Nike, whose Roman name is Victoria, and of course is the representation of victory. So you ever think, why did Nike name the shoe brand Nike? It's after the Greek goddess, and it literally is the Greek word that means victory. So any Greek name that has Nico in it, like Nicopolis or something like that, the stem in that means winning, victory in war. All right, it's time for you guys to take a brain break. This has been Athena Part 1. Continue in the next video with Athena Part 2. Okay, well, late omnes.